Thanks, Ken. And hi, everybody. So great to be here, isn't it? In this beautiful weather and among friends and colleagues and new friends. I am so delighted to be able to introduce Deborah Madison today. Chef, writer, gardener, activist, and my long-term friend. I first met Deborah almost or over perhaps 30 years ago. At that time, she had just started Greens, a revolutionary vegetarian restaurant in San Francisco, and had just written the Greens cookbook with Edward Brown, a wonderful baker. She was an ordained Buddhist priest living at that time at Green Gulch Farm and Zen Center. Her vegetarian cooking really was a revelation at that time, nuanced, playful, light, delicious, and utterly honest to the fresh produce that she was sourcing from Green Gulch Farms and other farms nearby. Around 1990, she moved first to Flagstaff and then to Santa Fe, where she managed the farmers market for a while and then started Escalera, another wonderful Southwest restaurant with David Tanis in 2000. In the Southwest, and as she traveled promoting her prolific stream of wonderful cookbooks, she became adept at cooking with ordinary vegetables, not just the wonderful things we see here in our markets, from really run-of-the-mill supermarkets. And I believe that's a huge part of Deborah's success, teaching us all how to cook delicious, healthy, fun food from the ingredients at hand. In writing Vegetable Literacy in 2013, her attention turned back to really educating everyday cooks about the plants and gardening and farming techniques that underlie producing such delicious food. I could take another 15 minutes to tell you all of the extraordinary accolades and recognition that Deborah has deserved, but I'll just take a few highlights. She received a mid-career award from the MFK Fisher Career Award. She's been inducted into the James Beard Hall of Fame Who's Who of Cooking. Her books have received numerous awards from the James Beard Foundation, from the International Association of Culinary Professions, and from Les Dames d'Escoffier. Deborah was actually raised here in Davis, California, and returns here fairly often to reconnect with her family and her roots. And also, she just told me, to stock up on olive oil and oranges and almonds that she can't get quite so readily in Santa Fe. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Deborah Madison.
Thank you.
Mic, right? Okay.
Thank you so much. That was very generous. I'm embarrassed about the almonds because everybody seems to be saying all the time, do you know how much water they take? And I do drive through the Central Valley on a fairly regular basis, and I notice that the fields aren't mulched at all, and they do take a lot of water, it's true. But my brother raises some, so I go to the farmer's market, and that's my source. It's legitimate, I hope. This is a year of many anniversaries for people. I realized last night when Amigo Bob was talking about the fact that EcoFarm is 35 years old. I also want to mention that the Seed Savers Exchange is 40 years old, that my alma mater, UC Santa Cruz, is 50 years old. I will not mention my own age, but it's old enough to have seen a few things. And I was thinking about how when we start out something, we're busy taking baby steps, and we're just reaching for the next chair or leg or table. You know, we can't think about there's going to be a room full of hundreds of people years later, or those stubby little carrots that first came out of the ground, impacted clay soil at Green Gulch, that there would be a day when Green Gulch farmers would be selling at the Ferry Plaza Farmers Market, that the Ferry Plaza Farmers Market itself would exist. We just can't know these things, but we get started and we go ahead, and then we find the world has changed somewhat. So I've been involved with food and cooking and farmers markets and all of that for over 30 years, and I've seen things change a lot, and mostly for the better. I vividly recall going to a new health food store in San Francisco in 1969, and lo and behold, they had vegetables. This was new. It wasn't just pills and stuff. They had a bunch of beets that were sitting on the counter wilting because they weren't refrigerated, and they hadn't been. But it was the first time that I remember seeing locally grown food in a store. We've come so far from that time. It's amazing. Our farmers market in Santa Fe, when I first started going there, consisted of 5 farmers selling carrots and onions and a few kind of indifferent tomatoes. To today, we have a permanent building, over 150 farmers at its peak. It's quite radically different, and there are different kinds of foods there as well. So I guess my credentials today consist of just having spent a lot of time cooking and running restaurants and the farmers market in Santa Fe, to writing about food and farming, and finally to attempting to garden. And I feel I've been really fortunate, and it is one of the advantages of being older, to watch this change take place and unfold throughout our food culture. It used to be that there was very, very little in terms of choice. There was iceberg lettuce. There were 2 kinds of potatoes and 1 or 2 kinds of apples. And today we go to the store or to the farmer's market, and it's incredibly diverse and varied compared to those days. So today's young people, at least some of them, if they were lucky, and I think a lot of them were, grew up with foods like arugula and fingerling potatoes and quite possibly tree-ripened fruit, and going to farmers markets and farm-to-table restaurants and having school gardens. But these are all, both the food and the programs, are relatively new. In 1979 at Greens, we were just introducing arugula and golden beets and fingerling potatoes. There were no school gardens at that time. Now you can go to Trader Joe's and you can buy all those foods, and for better, for worse. Now Trader Joe's, I'm not a particularly passionate fan of Trader Joe's, but I have noticed the last few years at Halloween they have big bins filled with fabulous varieties of winter squash that they're selling for Halloween, not for food. And among them is a wonderful heirloom called Marina di Chioggia, and there's La Musquée de Provence and a bunch of others that are absolutely delicious. They sell for $5.99. At my farmer's market, a substantial blue Hubbard squash was around $20. And I've happily paid that much for Marina, and Violina rugosa, another butternut variety that's fantastic, because I think they're really great vegetables, and I absolutely believe in them, and I really want to cook with them. But I've noticed that the farmers who've grown them have given up. They've given up growing this squash because I think not enough people were willing to take a chance on it. They also didn't cut them up into pieces so that you could get a manageable piece. Most people aren't really ready to pay $30 or $20 or more, whatever, for one vegetable. So I would say, from this example and others, that the work of moving the diversity of plant foods forward is not yet quite finished. There are aspects of food education that still need tending to, and growing our food literacy is one of them. As farmers, and I know this is a varied crowd, you're not all farmers, nor are all the farmers selling at farmers markets, but it's the perspective I'm coming with today. But as farmers, you've already played an incredibly crucial role in this matter. Food literacy, especially vegetable literacy, has to do with seasonality, with variety, and mostly the names of the foods we encounter. So if we're going to go beyond the mentality of the supermarket, I think we, as consumers, have to keep growing our literacy. We have to be smart about what's what. We don't want to go back to where we were. So we have, I would say, about everything is much more complicated than I'm making it. But let's say we have 3 models of food consumption. There's a gastropub in Santa Fe that I've gone to, and you get the menu, and the first thing it says is everything all the time. And when I saw that, I thought, that is such an American way of thinking, everything all the time. And that's what our supermarkets offer us, in a way, is everything all the time, without any regard to the actual time of season or the place where we are. Personally, I don't think this is a very useful model for us, nor do I find it's a very good way to live. It's inefficient, and it's disconnected from who we are as creatures of time and inhabitants of place. And in part, this is what the local seasonal chatter is all about, and why it matters, even if the words local and seasonal do get to sound a bit like a cliche. They do get used a lot, but they also do mean something. So if all you know about strawberries is a big berry with a hollow core, you're missing out on something that's really amazing, something that has an incredible perfume, that has sweetness and magic, and which might be small and lumpy. And it also might have the power to change your life. I know such a berry changed mine. Strawberries take water to grow. I live in the desert, so basically I don't eat local strawberries because there aren't any. And I don't eat other strawberries because they're not amazing. But when I do get to where they grow and they're good, I eat as many as I can, and then I carry home as many as I can carry home. It's the feast or famine approach to food, and I like it that way. It makes me feel more like a human animal and less like a consuming machine. And a third model is the model of food as medicine or pharmacy. That approach, which I'm also not terribly fond of, but I think it might have good possibilities for farmers. And I'm going to tell you why. Once beneficial foods are identified for their phytonutrients, we Americans feel that suddenly we have to have them all the time. So amazingly, there are blueberries at all times in our supermarkets, and even our not so great markets, not big markets, even small markets. But there are other good foods to eat that provide the same phytonutrients that blueberries do that are available in winter, such as certain kinds of potatoes. So both blue and purple potatoes and blueberries, it turns out, are a good source of anthocyanin, which is the phytonutrient they contain. Now, Joe Robinson just wrote a book called Eating on the Wild Side. It's not about wild foods, but it's about getting as close to them as we can in terms of their phytonutrients. So in this book, Joe Robinson identifies which varieties of fruits and vegetables are the best sources for phytonutrients, and she names them from those in the store to seeds and seed catalogs in case we're planning to grow our own. And some people might just be looking at this kind of information and caring a great deal about it. And Joe Robinson does recommend that the best, most nutritious foods are found at farmers markets or CSAs or the equivalent, and that they are the best places to buy fruits and vegetables. So you as farmers might stand to benefit if you can and you wish to pass on both names and information, though the names are most important. Actually, if people read her book, they'll be looking for blue potatoes and other foods. A few of our local farmers in Santa Fe do grow all blue potatoes, the ones that are highest in anthocyanin, but not one of them labels them. And I'm not sure what they're thinking, that we're just supposed to know by looking that they're all blue inside, or that it doesn't matter, that customers don't care. When I asked one farmer if his potatoes contained, or he had a basket, and I said, are those all blues? He was surprised and really pleased that I had asked. And he said that identifying varieties was very, very important to him. Well, it was early in the day and it was cold and there weren't many customers, so we chatted for quite a while about varieties of vegetables that he liked to grow. But finally I had to ask him, why didn't he identify his potatoes with some signage? He responded by saying that, oh, he just couldn't get around to making signs. So I offered to help him. But he didn't ask me for my name or number or make a date. So I doubt he's going to get around to making any signs this winter, even though we have 3 or 4 months of when active farming isn't really possible in New Mexico. It snowed yesterday, I've been told. So very few farmers where I live seem to want to make signs, and I hope that's not true of the farmers in this room. I've seen some of your slides, and I do see signs, and that's great. Identifying produce with a name is very important for a number of reasons, but basically it comes down to this. If we can't identify something that we once really enjoyed, if we don't know what to call it, then we can't ask for it again. And that food that we can't ask for is the one that becomes in danger of disappearing. Don't forget, we're really good at identifying brands of jeans and cars and cell phones and all kinds of things. So we're also capable of recognizing names of vegetables and fruits. This isn't a rare gift, it's just rare with respect to produce. It isn't something we've practiced. So if you were born or you were around in the 1950s, late 1950s and 60s, or you don't remember the 2 kinds of lettuce, try to imagine it. Salad was iceberg. If you were lucky, maybe romaine. All those amazing heirloom lettuces that you now grow were lost to the public. They were alive mostly in memory. It took the Seed Savers Exchange, starting in 1975, 40 years ago, to bring them back, which they did by creating an exchange, a place where people could offer some seeds that perhaps their aunt had left behind for a favorite bean in exchange for another kind of seed, much like is going to happen tonight. Sometimes there were only a very few seeds to exchange, but those few seeds are what got these vegetables growing again. And this exchange led to many of the foods that we're all enjoying today. But can we take our patrimony or our matrimony for granted just because our markets are full of these beautiful heirlooms that were once lost? I, for one, would not count on it. And this is particularly important with tree crops and nut crops because the time invested in growing trees is long. Trees aren't lettuce, which is up and ready to pick in 6 weeks. With trees, we're talking about years. So if you grow and sell an amazing peach or a curious walnut that's really good tasting, and you don't say what it's called, and maybe it's a bit of a challenge to sell because it's not bright red or huge, or it's an apple that's lumpy and an odd shade of green, but so delicious. And how are people going to know how to ask for it? Here's a scene that I've witnessed many, many times. A woman wanders up to a farmer in the farmer's market. She thinks she remembers that this farmer had a wonderful peach. And she says, "Was it you who had that wonderful peach last year?" And the farmer doesn't know, if it was she or not. So she says, "Well, was it a freestone or a cling?" The customer doesn't know these terms, so the farmer takes another tact. Was it white-fleshed or yellow? Customer can't quite remember. It could go on, flat or round, fuzzy or smooth, red-skinned or pale. I have no idea, the customer finally says, but it was really good, and it was really sweet, and it was really juicy, and she wants it again. For all we know, she's describing a nectarine. How much easier it would have been if she knew the name of the fruit she desired. Then she could have said, are you going to have those Babcocks again? Or Al Crochet's favorite peach, the red cow? Or when will your Arctic Rose nectarines be in the market? This is a real question for us because we have late freezes, so we have many years with no fruit at all. This would be so much easier and so much more straightforward, and it could grow the farmer's business, because when you're at a farmer's market and other shoppers are likely to overhear the question, then they get interested too. This actually happened in line this morning on the way to breakfast. Somebody heard me talking to Al about his favorite peach, and she turned around and wanted to know too. They too will ask, when the Babcocks or the red cows will be in the market. And friends of this shopper who heard her talk about these peaches endlessly last year will want to get some too. Or maybe a restaurant features your peach by a name on the menu and customers are again intrigued. What's that, they wonder? It's been called out with a name. It must be worthy. So they order that peach dessert. Or maybe they order just a peach if the peach is really that good. And some restaurants do feature particular fruits just all by themselves that are excellent for dessert. And I'm not making this up. So naming is one place where big stores fail, except in the case, oddly enough, of citrus fruits. They seem to get those names, and they get them right. But other than that, they scarcely name varieties, and when they do, they often get them wrong. Look at sweet potatoes versus yams. And it's often very generalized, like black plums or red plums. Now, saying black or red sounds sort of smart, but it completely overlooks all the other colors and descriptively named varieties that are in existence, like the beautiful golden code drops, black or yellow friars, the russeted Santa Rosa, elephant hearts, Kirk's blue, opal, green gage, just to name a few, and there are many. Names describe these fruits, their colors, their sizes. They hint at their connection to a breeder, to a place, a person. They set one variety apart from another. I want to read a quote that I recently found. To name a thing is to invite it to ensnare itself into your mind, to distill and compress the essence of a gestalt into a single evocative motif which can be regenerated at will. Just add attention and stir. So I thought that was a very powerful quote, but I changed it a little bit, so I'm going to read my version of it. To name a fruit is to invite it to ensnare itself into your memory, to distill and compress the essence of plum or peach into a single evocative memory, which can be regenerated at will. Just add the name and close your eyes. As the growers and sellers of foods, the name is already set. It's up to you to use it and to put it out there. And correctly, I might add, which means actually spelled right, and not a name that you just made up, unless you back it up with the more common name. So here's why it's important to spell things correctly. I was driving to the farmer's market last week, and I was a little late getting started, so I actually could hear our local radio program on the radio that is broadcast from the market. And on that program, one of our farmers who grows a lot of potatoes was talking about his potatoes, in particular, La Rat variety. Probably many of you know that. It's a wonderful potato. And when I got to the market, I was planning a dinner, and I thought, I think I'll buy some of those La Rats. So I went to his stand, and I noticed that his sign, he does have signs, said Larrat, L-A-R-R-A-T. And I looked at it, and I thought, is this some new potato I'm missing? It looks like the La Rat. So I asked him, and he sort of shrugged it off and said, oh yeah, that's misspelled, but that's not my area. He was busy rubbing the roots off of carrots because he said people wouldn't buy them if the rootlets were on. So that's pretty legitimate. But he did turn to his assistant, and he pointed it out to her that it was misspelled. She shrugged and said she'd change it and did nothing about it. So does this matter? I thought, maybe I'm just being kind of, bookish about it. But then I thought, what if I were a customer and I didn't know this potato and the farmer's really busy and he can't talk about it to me? I buy some anyway, and I go home and I look it up on the internet. So if you look up La Rat, the correct spelling, you go to Wikipedia immediately and you discover that this is a small fingerling potato with a unique nutty flavor and smooth buttery texture. You learn that it's a variety that originated in France or maybe Denmark. They're not sure about this. More research is needed. In the late 19th century, and that it's a favorite of French chefs, including Joel Robuchon, who uses them to make a potato puree. Some of your customers might actually know this chef and have eaten that puree. Other chefs recommend roughly mashing them or using them in salads or casseroles. The New York Times reports that the taste hints richly of hazelnuts and chestnuts. So now you have some ideas about how to use your Larat potato, what to expect, and you're excited and you feel that maybe the $3.50 a pound you paid for them is completely worthwhile. But if you go to the other spelling, Larat, you get a reference to a pharmacist, the Urban Dictionary definition, which means to be on your own or a loner. You get a profile for a David Larat. You get a link to a Brazilian agency that produces music shows and festivals, and another link to a French singer, none of which will guide you as to how to use your potato. So it does make a difference. Excuse me. And naming, also, I think one of the things I love about when farmers name the foods they sell is they appear to be really intelligent and in charge, and they are. Naming says that you as a farmer, you've gone beyond the general category, like peach or lettuce or squash, to something that's specific, a named variety, and that implies knowledge and familiarity, experience, and the wisdom of choice. There's a reason that you chose that particular variety to grow. And suddenly there's an aura of respect around the farmer who can say what something is in a little detail, who can and does refer to the name of a vegetable or breed of meat or the type and the age of cheese. I've noticed at our market that the farmers who really get ahead are the ones who not only grow beautiful food, but who know what it tastes like and who know what it's called, and they share that knowledge with a sign. So think about Angus beef for a minute. I mean, this is just a stocky black cow. It never was known to be particularly exceptional until a whole ad campaign was created around it. And the same thing happened with portobello mushrooms and now baby bella mushrooms. Lots of people got behind it in a serious way and spent a lot of money to bring these things into focus. Well, you can do the same thing with what you grow, but far less aggressively and much more simply. And more honestly, just add a name. Put a name to your zucchini. If you grow costata romanesco, say it's meaty, it's ribbed, it's a favor of, name your local hero who loves to use it because of its wonderful dense flesh. Or point out that warty blue-green Marina di Chioggia is the squash that was used in Italy and still is used in Italy, I hope, to make pumpkin ravioli. Tell your customers, we like to know these things. And if you've eaten it and you can recommend it, so much the better. One thing that's important for farmers to know, and I'm sure you do know this, is that a lot of people are gardening today. They may not be growing much. They may be doing it so their children can have the experience of picking food and eating something fresh. They may do it for their own sanity and their own pleasure. But regardless, they're probably reading a lot of the same seed catalogs that you are. And they're ordering seeds by name and description. So quite possibly, they're pretty well informed. They're also reading magazines and books that cover a lot of these same territories. My brother farms up in Davis, and he and his wife, Diane, sell flowers at the Davis Farmers Market. So a few years ago, I noticed that they had copies of Martha Stewart Living hanging around their house, which seems sort of surprising to me as it's an expensive lifestyle magazine, and I don't think lifestyle is really what they're about. So when I expressed surprise, Diane said, "Are you kidding? My customers read this, and they're looking for these flowers. They're looking for these plants. It's been the greatest help in determining what to plant." So Martha Stewart does feature unusual flowers, and that's what my brother likes to grow. So anyone who subscribes to Sunset or Mother Earth News or Martha Stewart or Organic Gardening or any other, even Food and Wine, all kinds of magazines or blogs, is bound to be reading a lot about vegetable, herb, and flower varieties. I do want to say that the layperson's interest in gardening does not mean that those of us who grow a bit of food don't need farmers and the farmers market. We definitely need you. You're the experts. We're the amateurs, as you'll see in my slides, I'm afraid. But what we do like as people who garden or are interested in food or eating well or reading magazines is some confirmation, some identification, some linkage, so that when we go to the farmer's market, we want to see how something is supposed to be. And our farmers are our guides to that. We tend to appreciate you more, not less, if we try to garden. So do not fear. Here's another side why naming is important. If you know that a particular variety of fruit or vegetable is really, really good, but not enough customers know this to support your growing, picking, packing, handling, then you might be tempted to tear out that beautiful Blenheim apricot, not grow those seedy black raspberries that are so delicious, or whatever they are. And when you rip them out, especially perennials, those plants are lost, at least on your farm and probably in your neighborhood as well, for quite possibly a very long, long time. And for example, my same brother once ripped out rows of some really interesting grapes because he got tired of customers who only wanted seedless grapes. And he also got tired of trying to educate them. He didn't want to grow seedless grapes because the more interesting varieties are seeded. So one day he just pulled them all out. And that's sad. I'm still kind of angry at him for doing that. I think he should have kept them. But one thing it did make me think about is possible that the business of introducing customers to, say, seeded grape varieties or things that are a little unfamiliar or don't quite have the color that has been bred into modern fruit and vegetables is an educational endeavor on the part of market managers. I think instead of Shop with a Chef or in addition to Shop with a Chef programs, it would be useful for the market to have a table where they introduce foods and they talk about seeded varieties. And often it turns out people don't like them because they don't know what to do with the seeds. They're little. Throw them on the ground. Put them in your pocket, swallow them. I mean, this isn't really a terribly big problem. Often it is a treasure that's lost, and it will be recaptured in a limited way. A few farmers will commit to growing a big, beautiful golden muscat grape, and a few oddball customers might value and buy it. And perhaps if others catch on, there'll be more. This could happen, but I don't know. I just saw gill feather turnip featured on a restaurant menu. Now the gill feather, which is actually a rutabaga, not a turnip, it was one of the first foods that was loaded on Slow Food's Ark of Taste. It was loaded on about 10 years ago, maybe even more. And now it's finally making its way into the culture because it has a story that goes with it, because it's almost disappeared, because Mr. Gillfeather was a cranky farmer who wouldn't let anybody grow the Gillfeather turnip. But Gillfeather's kind of a lovely name. So here it is. It's starting to appear. I know a couple of restaurants where it's featured. And I think that that's really interesting. And if it can do it for a rutabaga, which is not the sexiest of vegetables, imagine what it could do, for others that are. I just noticed that from the folks from Territorial Seeds wrote recently in an email, the things you can do to ensure that those varieties you love are still carried are to grow them and share them and eat them. Come to think of it, this is exactly what needs to be done with any food that we don't want to go extinct. And to that, I think we can add naming the foods is something that will really help. So as a customer, I ask you, no, I beg you, as farmers, to please label what you sell. Tell us it's a limestone lettuce. We want to know. Even if we're not growing a garden, we might be reading about varieties and we're up on the information and we want proof that these foods really do exist. And if they're named, I think that we tend to want to buy them more or be willing to give them a try than if they're not. Now, we have a very good farmer in our market who is actually trained at UCSC in the agroecology program. And he has gorgeous vegetables, including limestone lettuce. So I asked him one day, why don't you label that so that people know what they're enjoying? And he replied he didn't label it because he didn't want other farmers to know what he was growing because they might grow it too. He wanted to treat it as something proprietary. Now, this is crazy because this is such a good farmer that people queue up to buy his produce. They stand in line for 10 minutes. When they get there, they're not going to not get the limestone lettuce because some other farmer down the road has it. They're going to buy it there too. And when I pointed out that pretty much all the farmers are buying seed from Johnny's and a few other places, all they have to do is walk around to see what people are going, go back and order the seed and plant it themselves. Didn't matter, not going to label it. Now he's convinced, and I love this farmer, he's a wonderful farmer, he's convinced that what people want next are really unusual vegetables like amaranths and things like that, which I think is great, and I think he's right. But if he doesn't say what these vegetables are and something about them, I think they could be a tough sell because human beings, people, customers, can be wary about trying something they've never seen that they don't know the name of what it tastes like. And rightly so, because it's our animal nature to be cautious around unknown foods. So, at this point, I'm going to show some slides of some produce that's actually labeled from various markets that I've been to. Just to show you, it's simple. This is a little, I hope it's not as dark as it seems on the screen here, but here's some chard, some little finger eggplant. Whoops, wrong way. Lots and lots of sprouts in this market. This has red Russian kale, mild sweet flavor, nutritional information. Might be interesting to somebody who wants to know that. The Cortland apple, it's tart, tangy, very juicy, $2 a pound. Now that can be changed. And you see this little sign is just put up with push pins. Here's a golden russet, a choice English dessert apple, as well as a famous cider apple, juicy, rich, agreeably subacid and aromatic. Now, the price is still $2 a pound, but you see that little piece of blue masking tape. This is what the farmers in this market seem to have figured out when they want to raise and lower their price. Here's something, the Macintosh. Again, a little description. This was in New England, this market, so they do have a lot of apples. The Royal Gala, named by Queen Elizabeth, the second. It's sweet, it's dense, it's crisp. Now, Pink Girl, our own heirloom tomatoes, round peak, excellent. I don't know if our own means it's their heirloom or they got them from somewhere, but it doesn't matter. It's okay. Here's another same tomato, but more description. It's heavy, it's rich tasting, it's perfect. One of the best tasting tomatoes in the market, a Grateful Farm customer favorite. Good advertising. Please don't squeeze. Signs can tell you how to behave in the market. You don't have time to talk to everybody and say, oh, please put that down. So please don't squeeze the tomatoes. Ripeness is judged by color. A little instruction. Now, this was curious because these are New Mex peppers, $4 a pound. I don't know why they're being grown there because, well, I'm from New Mexico now, so New Mexican peppers taste best when they're grown in New Mexico, I think. But anyway, that doesn't seem to matter. Foods wander off. So this Joe Parker New Mexican chili, it's good information that it's thick-walled, it's used for stuffing, roasting, and sauces. Mild spice with great chili flavor, roast and freeze. That's because we do a lot of roasting of chilies and then freezing. It's not a particularly well-grown pepper for this variety because it's very lumpy. And these are actually a commercial variety that are grown because commercially they have very straight sides and they're easy to stuff. And they're prepared that way for restaurants. Scallions, I love this, full of vim and vigor, meet your match in these scallions. Somebody was saying they used a lot of scallions today in their restaurant. A little goes a long way, all week, used raw, Also such a treat, roasted or barbecued, sauté for pasta. They're giving you lots of ideas here in these scallions. Now, this is in Colorado, Boston marrow squash on Slow Food's Ark of Taste, a New York Native American heirloom, excellent eating, sweet, fine-grained. I love people who raise winter squash because they have to haul these heavy things to market and usually haul them home again and back to market and home again. I think it takes a special passion to grow winter squash. Here's a Hopi orange, Seeds of Change, rare, tasty, yellow flesh. Pikes Peak, that's a more local squash. The Sibley, beautiful. It's a fabulous squash. Sweet flesh, great flavor, excellent keeper, reaches its peak after the new year on the Ark of Taste. So it's giving you reference, it's giving you information, it's giving you the name, and so forth. Here, this person has recipes next to her squash. This actually isn't a market. This was a tasting at a biodynamic garden of different kinds of carrots and turnips and things. But they're all very well labeled because there's no point in tasting them if you can't say, I like the better, you know. You want to have a name. I like the dragon better. The dragon doesn't have such good flavor. It helps you negotiate the world of difference. Now, this is in Santa Monica flour. These are bags of Sonoran wheat flour, Glen flour, red fife, and also the wheat berries. We wouldn't think of not labeling wheat. You just wouldn't do it. I mean, people wouldn't even recognize it. So the same should be true for vegetables. Now, this is kind of crazy. I love this. This is also in Santa Monica. This farmer is very excited about Gwen avocados. They are finally here. They're delicious. They're great. They're full of flavor. They're $1.50 each. They stay green when ripe. Well, I guess the hostas turn sort of dark. Today's special. Lots of information. This neighboring booth was a little calmer, certified organic, MacArthur avocados. I don't know, you don't know anything about them. I kind of like the enthusiasm of the first sign. And here's just a big display where everything is labeled. That's nice to see. Thumbtacks are holding it together. Thumbtacks are doing it here too. You can also label right on the vegetable. Sometimes. I love this, that they just wrote golden midget. You know, sometimes farmers will write the price too, and that's very convenient, you know. And if they really know their stuff, and there are some farmers I've known who do, they'll say, ready by Wednesday, or eat now, or some bit of information that they really know and we just guess at. This is really good. Your last chance until next week, possibly. These are yellow barley dates, and they are the most delicious date. And if you don't know, well, this is California, you may know them. But when they get brown like this, they are like caramel candy. They are so good. But this business of saying, this is your last chance to do it is very important. And farmers can build, I think, a lot of interest or awaken lazy intended people who meant to buy them or meant to do those cucumbers or meant to put up tomato sauce, and suddenly they have no more opportunity. But I'm going to talk more about that later. These are just some cheeses. Again, we wouldn't think of having a cheese without a name on it. This is in Ireland. This has a little more information, this cheddar cheese, raw milk, cow's cheese, cheddared and milled by hand, sold within 6 months of age. That's a lot of information. Irish apples, the variety is L-Star. Ask for a taste. Okay, I'm going to just pause for a minute because I wanted to say about letting customers know the beginning of a season, when it's coming up, or something is coming to the end of a season. You want to build anticipation for something that you grow and warn customers when the season's coming to an end. I think this definitely builds connections to foods in their moments of time. And this is a celebration approach rather than the everything all the time approach. I see a lot of chefs and caterers at the market, and they know that the comings and goings of produce is great news to pass along to customers. Saying that you're serving the first asparagus of the season adds value to it. It piques interest. It sells it. Chefs know this, and they have to sell what they buy. And farmers should know it too, because you guys are the first in command after all. So let's see, 2:51, I have 5 more minutes? Okay. I just wanted to mention, because the other side of, this is just foods that are in the culture that are familiar, they just don't have their names. But there are other foods that I think with climate change, with shift and everything that we're experiencing in terms of climate are going to become interesting to us, such as this. This is in the amaranth family, orac. It's also called mountain spinach. Easy, easy, easy to grow. Really handsome, very delicious. It's one of the foods that's described as being salt tolerant, will take alkaline soils. And if you taste it, it actually does taste a little salty. That's just a seed head of the green variety. It's a pretty plant. There's some amaranths in here that are growing up. They're going to soon be way taller than the sunflowers. You can eat the leaves as well as the seeds. They're pretty easy to grow. They don't mind the heat. They do fabulously. That's another amaranth. These are also amaranths. It's a whole bouquet of amaranth greens that I found at a farmer's market. Purslane. We know about eating, wild purslane. This happens to be a cultivar. I'm looking down on it in my garden, so you can't see that it's actually about this tall and has big fleshy leaves and is cleaner because it's not crawling on the ground. It's a really delicious purslane. Lamb's quarters. I mean, this is a weed. This grows everywhere. They're delicious. We call it wild spinach in New Mexico, and you treat it just like spinach, and here it is at the farmer's market, labeled $3. It's amazing. This is another kind of amaranth called guanzantle, which I've eaten a lot of times in Puebla, Mexico, which is unbelievably delicious and healthful. Jerusalem artichokes, just the flowers. Why these are $5.99 a pound in a store, I don't know, but they are. They're the easiest thing to grow. You'll never get rid of them. And, you really won't get, I didn't believe that. I said, that's the kind of plant I want to grow. Tell me you can't get rid of it and I want it. Well, now I'm kind of sorry. Kohlrabi leaves. One of our farmers started selling broccoli leaves at the market. He called it broccoli kale, which is not, of course, a possibility. But he said he called it that because people like kale. But they might not like eating broccoli leaves. But they were small, they were tender. He cut them in strips, he cooked them with onions, passed out samples. And now Melissa's is selling broccoli leaves. And I've gotten them to see what they're like. They're horrible. They're big. They're raunchy. It's like eating the stuff that normally should be just thrown on the path. Wild foods like miner's lettuce, coming back. Radish pods. These used to be edible, and they still are edible. All the members of this family make these seeded pods. And when tender, you can stir fry them. You can pickle them. You can do all kinds of things with them. Spinach crowns, a part we throw away usually. The little root, the rootlet and the very base of the spinach. These, once you wash them, wash the sand out of them, they're delicious. They're beautiful. They make a lovely garnish. They're food. There's no reason to throw them away. Okay, this is my embarrassment. It's salsify. This is the first year I tried to grow it in kind of difficult soil for it. But salsify is one of those vegetables that is kind of a forgotten one. It's now coming back. It's getting sort of trendy. But it may not be worth growing. It's covered with rootlets, goat's beard. It oxidizes the minute you peel it, and it doesn't have much flavor either. But you know what? It's really easy to grow. It's really easy to grow. It loves to grow. So, ramps. Ramps became very chic. Now they seem to have lost a little of that, but here's another wild food. It pains me to see it in a restaurant in Santa Fe because I don't grow anywhere near there. But if you live where they grow and you can harvest them, carefully, I think that's another good food. This is actually a wild plant from the beach in Greece, in Kalamata, that I picked with a Greek friend of mine. She said, oh, these are wonderful. They're wild artichokes. Well, they're not artichokes at all. It's a small ground-hugging plant, but they're in the same family. And we took them home and cleaned them. We cooked them with potatoes. They have that faint artichoke flavor. They're delicious. If you've spent time in countries sort of other than ours, you do see people walking around digging up mushrooms and chicories and plants like this, and we can do that too. And finally, this is a basket of kale blossoms that have gone to seed that have gone to flower that farmers all over the Portland Farmers Market were selling and trying to pass off as kale Rob. And they're not, they are kale blossoms and Robs are turnips. But in any case, they can be eaten. They really can be eaten. And so can when the collards sprout and they make their yellow flowers. They're very tender. They're very good. So I do think we need to consider the possibility of eating all the parts of foods, not just the equivalent of the steak, not just the broccoli crown, but the leaves, the stems, possibly the mature flowers once they bloom of a relative like collards. Squash greens, quinoa leaves, delicious if you ever had them. Fava leaves. There are many, many plants. There's many parts of plants that we ignore, but I think we might be eating them again, and I think the farmers, those of you who are growing them and selling them at the farmers market, if you can put a name to them, if you can cook them up yourself, so you know something about them, then we're all going to just move forward like that. So thank you very, very much. And